Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, October 24th, 2024. All right, so first thing, another reminder about the fundraiser. One way you could help us out is if you go to Twitter. Go to the antiwar.com account. You'll see a pinned tweet there, and that is the letter from Dr. Feroz. You could just give that a retweet to share that to more people. Antiwar.com is entirely funded by its readers. So if you watch this show, if you appreciate the work that I do, if you read antiwar.com and you have the means, please go to antiwar.com/donate to help us out. All right, so the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, B'Tselem says Israel is carrying out ethnic cleansing. So the Israeli rights group B'Tselem said in a press release on Tuesday that Israel was carrying out an ethnic cleansing campaign in northern Gaza and called on the world to stop it. So the group said, quote, "The magnitude of the crimes Israel is currently committing in the northern Gaza Strip in its campaign to empty it of however many residents are left is impossible to describe, not just because hundreds of thousands of people enduring starvation, disease, without access to medical care, and incessant bombardments and gunfire defies comprehension, but because Israel has cut them off from the world," end quote. And B'Tselem, for those not familiar, it's an Israeli human rights group that was started to shine a light on crimes being committed by Israeli occupation forces in the West Bank, in the occupied territories in the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem. They were one of the first to, officially declare Israel an apartheid state based on the occupation of the Palestinian territories. So Israel began its renewed assault on northern Gaza at the beginning of the month and ordered the estimated 300,000 to 400,000 Palestinian civilians living in the area to head south. B'Tselem said, quote, "Ever since Israel's current operation in the northern Gaza Strip began on October 5th, the area has been under a near complete siege, relentlessly pummeled by the military," end quote. And you see a picture. This is from Wednesday, more Palestinians being displaced. Gaza's government media office said Wednesday that at least 770 Palestinians have been killed in northern Gaza in 19 days. Dozens more are missing and over 200 have been kidnapped by Israeli forces. According to B'Tselem's press release, over 50,000 Palestinians have been forced out of their homes. And the Israeli military is not shy about it. On Wednesday, the IDF's Arabic language spokesman put out a tweet saying that Israel has cleared out 20,000 Palestinians from Jabalia, where this assault has been focused, and arrested more than 150. And if you look at this post, I mean, he put up a drone video of just a road of Palestinians walking, being forced out, So this is what's happening in Gaza right now. It is ethnic cleansing. I've been talking about this a lot, I think, because it's really important. It's not getting near enough the attention it deserves in kind of the Western mainstream media. And this is under they're carrying out this general's plan that basically calls for, set an evacuation after a certain point, declare the area a closed military zone, shoot everybody, kill them who's there, anybody that you can't kill, starve them to death with a blockade. And I saw they're saying, there's reports that Jabalia has already been turned into that closed military zone. Well, right now they've been going house to house, building to building, and telling all the Palestinians to leave, forcing them out at gunpoint. I mentioned just some of the background on this. So B'Tselem said, quote, "Other than in the most exceptional cases, Israel does not allow humanitarian aid or emergency crews in, taking advantage of the fact that global attention has been diverted to irreversibly changing reality on the ground," end quote. The rights group said that Israel was committing some of the gravest crimes under the laws of war and called on the world to take action. The group said, quote, "Without immediate, decisive action from the international community, without using every tool available, political, legal, economic, the mass killings in the northern Gaza Strip will continue, and the suffering of its besieged civilians will grow," end quote. So the sad thing about this as an American is that the only country with the power to stop this is the United States. They supply the majority of the weapons that are being used to carry this out. Israeli officials have acknowledged without that support, they wouldn't be able to do this. They wouldn't be able to sustain military operations in Gaza for more than a few months. So where are we at with that? Well, on October 14th, the Biden administration sent a letter to Israel saying, you have 30 days to let more aid into Gaza. And conveniently, that deadline is after the election. So who knows, everything's going to be different after the election. And then when the State Department was asked, what are the consequences going to be if they don't meet your demands, the State Department wouldn't say. So it's just a complete joke, just a complete ruse for the election. It's been over a year. If they wanted to cut off Israel, if they wanted to stop the genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza, they would have done it a long time ago. But this is the reality. The United States has the power to stop this simply by cutting off weapon shipments. The Israeli Air Force is completely reliant on American-made, not just bombs, but, spare parts and maintenance and everything like that. So the next one here, more about this. Half of Jabalia ethnically cleansed by the Israeli army as schools burn. This article is from Middle East Eye, just some reporting from sources on the ground in northern Gaza. Israeli troops are going school to school in Jabalia and nearby areas to forcibly remove unarmed, starved, and besieged Palestinian civilians from their homes as the military campaign to ethnically cleanse North Gaza nears its third week, eyewitnesses have told Middle East Eye. Under the cover of heavy airstrikes and artillery shellings, large Israeli ground forces directly and systematically attack homes and buildings used as shelters by displaced families, forcing everyone out at gunpoint. The buildings, including UN schools and houses, are subsequently either razed or burned by Israeli soldiers to prevent people from returning. Troops then separate men from women before taking them to humiliating field interrogations and later abducting many of them to unknown locations. Women and children are forced to head south of the Jabalia refugee camp. Some were bombed and killed as they fled, according to media reports. Refusing to comply with Israeli orders, many of them went west of Jabalia to Beit Lahia, while others arrived at the nearest points in the adjacent Gaza city. So again, this is happening in northern Gaza, and people are trying to pretend that it's not. I mean, I went over that thing yesterday that apparently privately Israel is denying that they're doing this to the U.S., but then when Blinken asked Netanyahu to publicly say you're not carrying out an ethnic cleansing plan in northern Gaza, he said no, because he is. So, again, this is just, I mean, I don't know. It's just really important, I think. This is just happening right now. And, of course, atrocities have been happening over the past year, but we know what the goal is here. And then they had that settlement rally the other day, the Resettle Gaza rally, where you have members of the Likud party calling for a new Nakba. This is the Nakba. It's happening right now. All right, so the next one here, our job is to flatten Gaza. No one will stop us. This is from Drop Site News. So this is a really kind of long piece. I don't know if I could really summarize it properly, but people should go check it out. Basically, it's about one Israeli battalion, their year-long mission of destruction, the 749 Combat Engineering Battalion, and they are, it's a lot about them going around and blowing places up, planting explosives and blowing houses up, blowing buildings up. And we've seen a lot of that in Gaza, and they filmed a lot of it, and they've been very excited about it. So if you want to go just scroll, definitely worth your time to go scroll through this to see some of the things that these soldiers have documented themselves. And I think I mentioned in the last story about Jabalia that they're saying the Israeli military, they're pushing people out of the buildings and then blowing them up, destroying them. That means they're not going to be able to go back. All right, so the next one here, Israeli forces kill 74 Palestinians in Gaza. Just an update on the death toll. Gaza's health ministry said Wednesday that Israeli forces killed at least 74 Palestinians and wounded 130 in the previous 24-hour period. The health ministry said the latest violence brought its death toll since October 7, 2023 to 42,792 and the number of wounded to 100,412. The ministry said, quote, There are still a number of victims under the rubble and on the streets, and ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them, end quote. So I mentioned the estimate from the healthcare workers. There's 99 American healthcare workers who volunteered in Gaza recently. They estimated that the true death toll is likely over 118,000. That accounts for Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead, and the indirect deaths caused by the Israeli siege. They say, they believe over 60,000 people have actually starved to death already. And then this is a horrific picture. It's a man holding a dead Palestinian boy. And Gaza's health ministry also said in a post on Telegram that it was running out of shrouds to cover the bodies of dead Palestinians. It said, quote, "Dear world, we don't need food nor drink as we will be murdered soon. Please send some shrouds to cover our corpses so that you won't be disgusted by the scenes of our blood and wounds," end quote. And we're talking about North Gaza. Israeli strikes were reported across the Gaza Strip on Wednesday. I think the heaviest in the north, but this picture is from Khan Yunis in the south of this dead child, children being killed, massacred every day. All right, the next one here, Al Jazeera decries unfounded Israeli claims about its journalists. So this article is from Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera has strongly rejected a claim by the Israeli military that 6 of its journalists based in Gaza are members of the Palestinian group Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The media network on Wednesday vehemently condemned the unfounded allegations by the Israeli army, which in a post on X described some of the named Al Jazeera Arabic correspondents as operatives working for Hamas's armed wing to promote the group's propaganda in the besieged and bombarded enclave. The 6 journalists that they named all work for Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera is just strongly denying these claims. They said in a statement, quote, "Al Jazeera categorically rejects the Israeli occupation forces' portrayal of our journalists as terrorists and denounces their use of fabricated evidence," end quote. So obviously the implication here is that Israel is saying these 6 journalists are legitimate targets. And these are some of the few journalists left in Gaza. Al Jazeera is one, has a very far reach. There are other journalists in Gaza that work for other news agencies. The photos that we use are from Reuters and other news agencies that they work with, and they get photos from journalists in Gaza. But Al Jazeera kind of has, I think, the biggest reach. And, that's what this is about. So I think, what is it? They've killed over 170 journalists in Gaza over the past year. So there's definitely, sounds like now there's a target on the heads of these 6 journalists. All right, so the next one here, universities raise Jewish students Gaza solidarity sukkahs. This article is from Brett Wilkins. So this is kind of interesting. Some maybe I shouldn't laugh, but some U.S. universities have torn down solidarity sukkahs that Jewish students opposed to Israel's war on Palestinians have built in recent days to honor the Sukkot holiday and to protest as the Israeli military continues to invoke the Jewish tradition as fuel for the destruction of Gaza. So sukkahs are temporary booths erected for the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. Sukkot. I always pronounce it wrong. It's Sukkot. And I remember when I used to live in Brooklyn, I lived in a Jewish neighborhood, a few Jewish neighborhoods. And on this holiday, kids would camp out. Sometimes the whole family would, in these kind of temporary structures. It's an 8-day celebration of the fall harvest and the ancient Israelites' escape from slavery in Egypt. So the reason why I laughed was because so they set these up. Jewish Voice for Peace, which has led a lot of the campus protests, set these sukkahs up at universities across the country. Some of the universities, not all of them, tore them down and threw them in the dumpster. The reason I chuckled in the beginning is, imagine if they just did that to sukkahs that weren't, Gaza solidarity sukkahs. That would be a huge, news story about anti-Semitism. But because these are Jewish students who are protesting against Israel, this hasn't gotten. I haven't seen this story anywhere else. Brett Wilkins covered this for Common Dreams, and we reprinted it. And if you scroll down here, one of the students who that had their sukkah torn down said that in previous years they were able to camp out in them, for the 8 days or however long exactly it is. But, because of the Gaza stuff, right in the trash. And that was at Washington, I believe. University of Washington. So, all right, the next one here. Israeli strikes pound ancient Lebanese city of Tyre. This article is from Jason Ditz. Overnight, Israel demanded an evacuation of civilians from a broad swath of the ancient Lebanese city of Tyre. They announced that they were going to forcefully act against Hezbollah. And if you've been following the Lebanon news, that means they're going to hit a lot of residential buildings. And then early Wednesday, the first airstrikes started. At least 4 airstrikes were reported so far against the city, with images of smoke seen rising from the city. The casualties aren't clear, but the strikes were within just a few hundred meters of a UN World Heritage Site in Tyre, which is an ancient Phoenician city and the home of Roman ruins. So as of when Jason wrote this, there's no reports of casualties in Tyre. I'm sure things will be clear tomorrow, but it looked like very heavy airstrikes in this ancient city. And we saw they blew up recently a really old village. They bombed a market that was built in the Ottoman era, like 1909 or something. It's just a real shame. All right, so the next one here. Thomas Massie says that the U.S. should not fund Israeli strikes on civilian targets. So Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, a Republican, said on Wednesday that American taxpayers should not have to fund Israeli strikes on civilian targets in Yemen. Massie wrote on X, quote, "If Israel insists on destroying civilian targets in Lebanon, let them buy and build their own weapons. American taxpayers should not be funding this," end quote. And he shared a video of a residential building in Beirut getting hit by an Israeli airstrike and then collapsing. And this video, weapons experts looked at it. You could kind of zoom in and you could like really see the bomb. Someone caught it the moment that it hit. So people zoomed in, and it looks like the bomb is a 2,000-pound Mark 84, which is the U.S. has provided Israel. And it appears to be outfitted with a guidance kit known as a SPICE kit. And that is made by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, which is an Israeli-owned weapons maker, an Israeli government-owned weapons maker. But some are manufactured in the United States under a joint venture with Lockheed Martin. And in October 2023, the State Department approved the export of $320 million in SPICE kits to Israel. So the U.S., pays for these for Israel, exports them to Israel. And that's what was used, or what it appears to have been used, to take down this building. Now, Thomas Massie, he's often been the lone Republican in Congress voting against pro-Israel legislation and consistently votes against all foreign aid. Massie's position has made him a target of the pro-Israel lobby group AIPAC, which said it spent over $400,000 against the congressman in the primary earlier this year, but Massie still easily won that primary. And if you remember, earlier this year, Massie did an interview with Tucker Carlson, and he said that every Republican member of Congress has an AIPAC handler. So, of course, this tweet is, making him the target again of the Israel lobby. I think people where he is from, where he represents in Kentucky, I think people really love Massie. So I don't think AIPAC's going to be able to unseat him too easily. But, he is putting himself out there. I mean, this is obviously the correct position that they should all take. But by doing so as a Republican, he is putting a target on his back. So it's good to see at least one Republican, speaking out about this. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. will buy long-range drones for Ukraine. This one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The Joe Biden administration will spend $800 million to help Ukraine manufacture long-range drones. The move escalates the proxy war against Moscow by handing Kiev another long-range munition. Additionally, the aid marks a rare step in Washington by spending American money on weapons produced by non-American arms manufacturers. And that is a privilege that Israel has with some of its military aid. But this is kind of a new thing here. And Ukraine has been producing a lot of drones. And they've used them to hit targets pretty far inside Russia. So now, as Kyle kind of says here, like, this is if the U.S. is going to be funding those drones, then that means those drone strikes are supported by the U.S. And they probably are in some ways. Maybe intelligence, GPS coordinates could be provided by the U.S. for those attacks. but this is kind of more direct support for that type of stuff. And British Defense Minister John Healey, he said that the UK also planned to fund Ukrainian production of long-range drones that should be able to hit targets further away than the Storm Shadow missiles that the UK gives Ukraine. And the Storm Shadow missiles have a range of over 155 miles. So again, we're talking about weapons with a pretty long range. And these kind of small kamikaze drones, they're able to produce a whole bunch of them. So the U.S. is going to, get in on that production. And also, Kyle mentions, a big part of the argument here that we hear is that, all this money we're spending on Ukraine, it goes into our, I forget what they call it now, the defense industrial base, which is the military industrial complex. That's something Massie has pointed out. But that's a big talking point. But here it's actually, no, the money's going to fund Ukrainian weapons making in Ukraine. So it is a different form of support. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. says that there's evidence of North Korean troops in Russia. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said Wednesday that there was evidence of North Korean troops being sent to Russia, comments that came a few days after he said the U.S. could not confirm claims about the matter. He said, quote, there is evidence that there are DPRK troops in Russia, using the abbreviation for North Korea. What exactly are they doing? Left to be seen. These are things that we need to sort out, end quote. So for its part, North Korea denied that it sent troops to Russia in response to South Korea's spy agency claiming that 1,500 North Korean troops were sent to Russia. North Korea's UN envoy on Monday said that it was a groundless rumor. Russia has denied earlier claims from Ukrainian officials that North Korean troops were fighting in Ukraine, which there was no evidence for that. And that seems to, I think it's clear now that they were, that just wasn't true, because now they've kind of moved on to this other claim that these North Korean troops are preparing to go to Ukraine. And NATO acknowledged that there's no evidence of North Korean troops actually fighting in Ukraine. So Zelensky is now claiming that 10,000 North Korean troops could be preparing to join the fighting in Russia's Kursk Oblast, and is asking NATO to take strong action. Austin said that if North Korea was sending troops for combat, it would be a very serious issue. He said, quote, if they're a co-belligerent, their intention is to participate in this war on Russia's behalf. That is a very, very serious issue, and it will have impacts not only in Europe, it will also impact things in the Indo-Pacific as well, end quote. So South Korea is reportedly considering sending weapons to Ukraine if North Korean soldiers join the war. South Korea has sent artillery shells indirectly through the U.S. They've shipped some to the U.S. that then go to Ukraine. So the South China Morning Post had an interesting report saying that South Korean opposition lawmakers are warning against taking action related to intelligence that's not clear. So this is two opposition members of South Korea's parliament who said in a statement, quote, there is nothing clear about whether the troops presumably sent by North Korea are combatants or non-combatants, or whether they are soldiers at all, end quote. So Zelensky is using the claims about North Korean troops to urge his backers to adopt his victory plan, which calls for significant escalations in military support, including long-range strikes on Russian territory with NATO missiles, and NATO countries shooting down Russian missiles and drones over Ukrainian territory. Those are two things that could risk nuclear war, and Russia has made very clear that the long-range strikes would be risking a nuclear response. So we'll see how the whole North Korea thing shapes out, if it will become clearer. The next one here, Gallant says a strike on Iran will show the world Israel's might. So Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Monday that he told a group of Israeli pilots and air crews that the world will see the Israeli military's might once it launches an attack on Iran. Gallant wrote on X, quote, in my conversation with them, I emphasized after we attack Iran, everyone will understand your might, the process of preparation and training. Any enemies that try to harm the state of Israel will pay a heavy price, end quote. So he said in the post that Israel was fighting a war on 7 fronts, referring to Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. Obviously, we've seen most of those countries and territories bombed Iraq, I don't know if Israel's bombed Iraq directly, but I know some of the Iraqi militias have fired some missiles and drones toward Israel. In a video of Gallant addressing the airmen, he said, quote, "After we attack in Iran, they will understand in Israel and elsewhere what your preparations have included," end quote. So we're still anticipating the Israeli attack. I'm not sure when it's going to happen. I saw some people saying it might happen this weekend, but we've kind of seen that like every week someone's been saying, "Oh, it's going to be this weekend." So, only time will tell. I really wouldn't be, I had that thing yesterday about Iran saying it might be a limited attack. Hopefully it is limited and it doesn't turn into a big war because the U.S. would be involved if it does. But man, I wouldn't, considering Israel's actions over the past few months, I wouldn't be surprised if they really do something big, like right before the U.S. presidential election. Well, we'll see. All right, the last one here. 2 U.S. troops injured in a raid against ISIS in Iraq. So 2 U.S. troops were wounded in a raid against ISIS in central Iraq that was conducted with Iraqi government forces, U.S. Central Command said on Wednesday. CENTCOM claimed that 7 ISIS fighters were killed in the raid, which it said was led by Iraqi forces. The command said, quote, "During the Iraqi-led operation, 2 U.S. military personnel were wounded while assisting Iraqi forces with site exploitation. They are in stable condition," end quote. CENTCOM said that Iraqi forces conducted strikes and follow-on raids on multiple ISIS locations and that the attack was enabled by the U.S.-led anti-ISIS coalition. Since the beginning of the year, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani has said Iraqi security forces could handle ISIS remnants without assistance from the U.S.-led coalition, but U.S. troops have continued to be involved in these combat operations. On August 29th, 7 U.S. troops were wounded during a raid against ISIS hideouts. The U.S. and Iraq, they entered talks earlier this year on the future of the U.S.-led military coalition. We know how that ended. They came out with this announcement saying that the coalition is going to officially end its mission by September 2025, but U.S. troops are going to stay under a bilateral security partnership. So it's not clear if any of the 2,500 U.S. troops are going to leave under that plan. And this is something, if things really pop off, these guys are going to come under very heavy attacks. If this turns into a full-blown war, we could see mass, I think, casualties, American casualties in Iraq. It's just a place where they're really exposed, especially if Iran decides to use their missiles against these bases. Could be really bad, but they just want to keep them there. They say it's about ISIS, but it's not about ISIS. It's about Iran. It's about supporting Israel. Israel wants them there. That's what this is all about. All right, that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints. One from Kyle Anzalone. Biden allowed his friend Bibi to destroy his presidency and his legacy. A really good kind of overview of Biden's horrendous foreign policy. One from Daniel McAdams. Neocons circling a surging Trump. Will he bite? One from Ethan Charles Holmes. Why the U.S. government stopped me from telling the untold at Sputnik. The U.S. sanctions have shut down Sputnik, which is was the radio station funded by Russia in the U.S., and they had to close down because of U.S. sanctions. One from Dan Grazier. Welcome to the defense death spiral. And our spotlight is from Eunice Tarawi and Sami Vanderlip. Our job is to flatten Gaza. No one will stop us. Oh, that's actually the story I have up in the news section there. It's an important thing to go check out. That's at Dropsite News. So please go check all that out. Again, help us with our fundraiser if you can, or just retweet that letter that we have. Also share this show, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff helps out. Let's hope, the news gets better soon. Anyway, I will be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Thanks for listening.